Hello everyone, and welcome to this next episode in the video discussion series from the RICS Tech Partner Program. My name is Andrew Knight and I've been with RICS for nearly 11 years now. I work within the standards, regulatory and thought leadership part of the organisation, and my role is to look at the impact of data and technology right across the built and natural environment. We have over 130,000 members worldwide, working right across the property life cycle, working with land, residential, commercial, alternative property and infrastructure. So data and technology has a huge impact in a positive sense to the way our surveyors can work right across the world. And today I'm really pleased to have Charles joining me from Legislate to talk about his particular solution. So Charles, please to join me.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me.
Great to have you on the discussion today. Now, whilst we ultimately will be talking a little bit about data and technology, unsurprisingly, it's always nice to perhaps get the human element there. And I'd love to start off by hearing a bit of a background about you, your backstory, and the kind of the origin story for Legislate.
Yeah, so I'm Charles, founder of Legislate. I have a background in engineering, and straight out of uni, I joined a spin out from the University of Oxford, focused in automating machine learning. So quite technical, quite data focused, but I was on the business development side of the business. And during my 3 years there, I realized that, or I was frustrated by how long contract negotiations would take, or how long it would take for me to generate a contract, or for me to receive a contract from the client and have it processed internally. And one of the key issues I found was a lot of the wasted time was basically spent waiting for legal to review the agreement, and because our agreements were never quite of a high enough priority, the agreements would always get reviewed later. And in 2 occasions, it didn't end up working out. We ended up losing opportunities despite the contracts being negotiated, just because too much time had been spent in processing these agreements. So ultimately, with Legislate, what I wanted to do was create a software platform that me, a non-lawyer business user, could use to create contracts without needing legal to get involved. That's the first problem that we're solving. So how do we make it easy for non-lawyers to create lawyer-approved contracts? Because obviously, there are plenty of template providers, but we want to offer a safe environment for creating your agreements and tailoring them to your specific requirements. The next problem that we're solving is post-signature. How do we make that data in the contract easily accessible and usable to the business user? Because with the typical PDF or paper format of an agreement, it's really difficult to answer simple questions like, how many of my employees are on a 3-month notice period or on a 30-day notice period? Are there any employees that have special terms? It's really difficult without having to manually go through your contracts. Whether you're in property or business, it's a real challenge. And so ultimately, we're using knowledge graph technology, which is patented, to represent terms in a contract and how they interlink. And yeah, we've been at it now for 2 years. We've got just over 2,000 users. There's a 50% split between property and business. We have a lot of landlords and letting agents using us for their tenancy or terms of business type agreements. And then we also, on the other side of the business, help startups and small businesses with their employment contracts and all the employment related documents. So that's quite a long background, so sorry if I've rambled.
No, a very good explanation. Now, in terms of the kind of the bits and bite side of things, I think you talked about a knowledge graph, but could you, without perhaps releasing the sort of the secret sauce, as it were, tell us how technology is being used to solve this problem? Because as you say, and it certainly brought to mind experiences I've had in previous lives of trying to get a document through the legal team and just there almost being a bottleneck around getting documents through. So in that sense, and I know you talked particularly about that issue of getting structured data out, because that's a particular thing that I have talked with a number of partners around, in terms of the fact that the world is still locked into these paper documents, essentially PDFs, where you have a lease agreement or some other contractual agreement where there's a lot of data in there, but it's simply in a PDF. And yes, you can use natural language processing to some degree, but you don't get that ability to analyze or derive those kind of data points. So what kind of technology are you using to actually help both produce these, as you say, in a kind of safe environment to make sure that they're legally fit for purpose, but also that kind of data piece. So talk us through the technology under the hood, as it were.
So I'll just share my screen.
Yeah, surely.
It's not a super animated demo, but I'd say there are several challenges that we have to face. First is not many non-lawyers actually create agreements or dive deep into agreements. So we had to make the user experience extremely easy for non-lawyers to understand what it is they're creating, what they're getting into, because although we have a chief legal officer and a legal team, Legislate is not giving legal advice. But what we're doing is we're giving our users the tools and we're empowering them to create their own lawyer-approved agreement. So we simplify the user experience, and creating a contract on Legislate is effectively a set of questions and answers, as you can see on the phone on the left. But the key thing about these questions and answers is they are all interconnected, meaning if you, for example, are creating an employment contract and you say that the notice period for terminating the agreement is only 1 month, then Legislate will not suggest a 6-month restriction period, because that would be unreasonable. Because that's the other key thing is when you're building a contract, the clauses are all interdependent, and we model those interdependencies with our knowledge graph. So what we're effectively doing is we capture the data from the user, and that data then goes into the knowledge graph. Rules guarantee that the answers are consistent with each other, that they're consistent logically, and then they're also consistent legally. And that was the example that I gave about, the restriction period, and not suggesting unreasonable restriction periods based on previous answers. Once we capture all that information and it's validated, we then generate an agreement, which is what you can see on the phone on the right. And that's pretty much the two main views that a Legislate user will see. But then afterwards, once you've created your contract and signed it, etc., that agreement then goes to a dashboard, which if I'll change page. And so this is a preview of what the typical insights that we can produce. So on the one hand, we will display, what your total payroll is and how it's distributed across your employees. Or for example, if you've got NDAs, what is your average confidentiality term and how that distributes. Those are high-level metrics which would typically be stored in a spreadsheet if you are a highly organized person. But if you're not, then you probably don't have those numbers on the top of your head. And so really what we're trying to do is we're trying to make that data accessible through these insights, but we're also making that data accessible through search, where every single contract term that is used to tailor your agreement then becomes a filter that you can use to filter down your contracts so that you can quickly determine, for example, how many of your tenancy agreements are expiring in 3 months or in the next 2 months, or how many properties have a rent greater than £2,000 per month. We can give you all that insight because we've been capturing that data at the start, and because we're using the knowledge graph, which is the same technology that, for example, Google or other search engines use to structure the internet and provide those highly accurate or relevant responses. We're using that to make contracts usable to contract managers or people who have contracts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And you alluded earlier to the kind of range of people who are using it, and you mentioned, particularly kind of property management. You're obviously seeing this being for use for, I presume, rental agreements, lease agreements, that kind of thing from a property perspective. And I know you mentioned you had an engineering background. Are people using these for, procurement, construction type contracts as well?
So I think we've got the vision to, establish Legislate as the contract creation platform for any type of template. I think the type of agreements where we've had the most success right now are agreements where lawyers typically don't get involved, or at least if they might be involved to produce a template at the beginning, but they won't necessarily assist with the post template negotiation or tailoring. So tenancy agreements is one where it's too low value for a solicitor to get involved, and it's too expensive for a landlord or a letting agent to justify getting a solicitor involved each time. But there's a lot of tailoring which happens between tenancies. Some tenants might want a break clause. Some tenancies are an HMO versus a sole occupancy, and there's a lot of tailoring which is required. And especially if a landlord or a letting agent does DIY those changes themselves, or they might, for example, read a blog article about a rogue tenant or a rogue landlord, and they'll throw in an extra clause. They might not appreciate that actually what they're doing is they're creating liability by exposing them to, by being too specific, or being too general and actually introducing something which is illegal. So that's where we're, as we're an early stage company, we're working with those type of users. So landlords, letting agents, helping them with their tenancy agreements, but all the tenancy related documents, so the how to rent letter, rent increases, section notices. These are all documents which are highly connected, and we make it easy to generate those. And so that's the one use case. And then on the business side, it's typically small business owners and helping them with their employment agreements. And then finally, I'd say where we also help niche entrepreneurs. So for example, early stage recruiters or early stage letting agents, we do actually help them with their terms of business agreements so that they can onboard landlords or clients. So that's where we are today. But obviously, as we mature and gain some more traction, we definitely love to partner with, especially there are industry bodies that provide templates that aren't necessarily negotiated, but are used. I know in construction that's the case, and we'd love to partner with them so that we can host their templates on our platform, so that their members can make those changes themselves without necessarily making mistakes, and then off benefiting from the whole data capture and data analytics post signature.
Indeed, I mean, I suppose that was my thought process, thinking about the number of existing contract forms, say in construction, whether that's NEC3 or the various other contract types that are out there. It's interesting to think that could be a direction of travel where you get those effectively those inbuilt templates that exist that once again would benefit from that kind of approach. I mean, it sounds, and this is a question I often ask our tech partners in terms of so many of our members being smaller practices, it feels like that's almost the direction you've started with in terms of helping those smaller businesses that A, don't have a legal department, and B, obviously want technology that's very accessible from a kind of a device perspective and also from a cost perspective. So presumably that feels like almost the part of the market you've begun with.
Yeah, so our target market today is the unlawyered. So as you mentioned, people who aren't lawyers or wouldn't have a lawyer, but we do also work with businesses that might have legal counsel. But again, legal counsels don't enjoy, restructuring employment contracts or reviewing NDAs. They don't. That's not the type of work that they enjoy doing, and because it's very time consuming and it's very low value. So really, when we kind of work with a company with a legal team, it's all about helping them do that low value, high volume work in a controlled and safe environment where they have the visibility, where they can control the parameters, and it makes their life a lot easier, especially when it comes to reporting. If they have to go through due diligence, or if they're just going through an audit, they can just through the Legislate dashboard give that 360 view of the state of their contracts, and because everything is standardized and the same, the due diligence process is almost inexistent. It's just really quick when it comes to reviewing those agreements. So we're not trying to replace lawyers or take them out of the chain. We're really trying to free time up for them so that they can focus on the high value strategic legal questions around which contract should I use, or what is the right strategy with this client, should we even do a contract? So really, those are just some examples where we worked with legal teams.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I mean, I suppose it must, to use the cliched phrase, must be been quite a journey, starting a business like this. What's been your favourite moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think favorite moments are obviously meeting people and having them join our journey, whether they're employees or clients. And I think especially in the past 6 months, we've managed to double our customer base every 2 months. It's really exciting to see that momentum, and especially I remember in the first year we were lucky to have some early pilot customers who trusted us and helped us learn about their problems and how we should grow to address them. To now seeing this momentum, which is we're still very early stage and it's still early on. To see that maybe whole year of silence to now things starting to fall in place, it's overall my favorite moment.
And once again, it's quite a common discussion point, is that kind of feedback from the